I went by your house, what a big mistake. But for a while I thought that I wouldn't break. I need something else to clear my head, someone to tell me how to live instead. Just open your eyes and take my advice. Stop rolling the dice and just compromise. It's the chance of your life. Okay, try to be brave. You have so much to save. Take control of your own life. Right now, every mistake makes you feel like a fake. Take control of your own life. Without any thought, I keep moving on. I don't even care if my soul is gone. So many words that I should have said. Not concerned about how to live instead. Just open your eyes and take my advice. Stop rolling the dice and just compromise. It's the chance of your life. Okay, try to be brave. You have so much to save. Take control of your own life. Right now, every mistake makes you feel like a fake. Take control of your own life. Nothing in life is good. Tired and misunderstood. I would fight if I could. If I believed I should. Okay, try to be brave. You have so much to say. Take control of your own life. Okay, try to be brave. You have so much to say. Take control of your own life. Right now, every mistake makes you feel like a fake. Take control of your own life.
It's getting closer to midnight. I try to get closer to you. Drinking courage from my red cup now. I will soon make a move. Ooh, I can taste it. The bittersweetness of taking a shot. A risk worth taking. If it's a shot of love, baby, I adore you. Maybe I adore you. Yeah, I'm feeling higher and higher. I'm up on cloud nine. Baby, I adore you. control, 'cause I adore you, adore you. Trying my best not to lose control. I want you, that's all I know. Trying my best not to lose control, 'cause I adore you. Baby, I adore you. Maybe I adore you. Yeah, I'm feeling high and high. I'm up on cloud nine. Baby, I adore you. Trying my best not to lose control. I want you, that's all I know. Trying my best not to lose control, 'cause I adore you, adore you.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry for what I have put you through. I still have you on my mind, my mind. My focus been drifting away from you. Just wasn't our time, our time. You can say what you want, but I know you hurt at night. But I tried and I tried and I tried to hold you tight. So I'm here tonight, and I'm giving us one last chance, 'cause I don't wanna lose what we had. 'Cause I'm not feeling right, and I'm tired of this loneliness. Let me prove it, 'cause I swear I will. Love you better, yeah, yeah. Love you better. Oh, love you better. Love you better, better. Lately I've been feeling some type of way. I'm losing my mind, my mind. I know saying sorry might not be enough. Just tell me how I can make things right. Things right. You can say what you want, but I know you hurt at night. But I tried and I tried and I tried to hold you tight. So I'm here tonight, and I'm giving us one last chance, 'cause I don't wanna lose what we had. I'm not feeling right, and I'm tired of this loneliness. Let me prove it, 'cause I swear I will. Love you better, yeah, yeah. Love you better. Love you better, better. Love you better, I might go too fast. I don't care about those limits, 'cause I want this to last like nothing ever lasts before. I might go too fast. Suddenly I feel so rich, though I don't know a thing. Oh, I
you feeling the same way I do? Are you feeling the same way I do? Are you thinking about me? Are you thinking about me? I'm having a hard time not doing anything other than thinking about you. So are you thinking about me? 'Cause I've been thinking about you. I've been thinking about you. I've been thinking about you. 'Cause I've been thinking about you. Yeah, I know some people fighting. Maybe it's for something real, but the truth that they are hiding is nothing that I fear. And I know that hate is my list, covering every possible kiss. So tell me why it matters, and tell me what you miss. Is this love that you're showing, or just another misleading play?
it's way too easy to say stuff I never do. You know it's not how I feel, baby. So can we let this slide? Can't stand to see you cry. Come a little closer, there's something I have to say. I love you and I hate you and I hope you feel the same. Come a little closer, baby, please don't walk away. I love you and yeah. You got nothing to prove, oh baby, I know you'll do right by me. I'll do right by you. You got nothing to prove, oh baby, I know. We got this. Go a little closer, there's something I have to say. I love you and I hate you and I hope you feel the same. Come a little closer, baby, please don't walk away. I love you and yeah. You got nothing to prove, oh baby, I know. We got this. Now that I'm looking back, I can see all the signs I tried to fill in the cracks that were spread in my mind, but I was all out of hope, lost in an endless maze. The emptiness had unfolded just like a void, but you.
Hello, and welcome to the U.S. Highbush Blueberry Council's first webinar of the new year. Happy 2021, everyone. This webinar is intended to share advances in post-harvest handling and storage technologies designed to preserve shelf life of fresh blueberries throughout the supply chain. Post-harvest diseases can limit the shelf life of fresh blueberries, and gray mold caused by botrytis is one of the most common, as we all know. Why is this important? Controlling these diseases can have a significant impact on inventory management and distribution, which from an economic perspective gives producers and handlers more strategic control of their inventory, ultimately increasing the profit potential of their crop. Today's webinar will focus on recent advances in post-harvest technology available to fresh blueberry handlers. Dr. Randy Beaudry of Michigan State University will share his perspective on how post-harvest handling has evolved, where it's headed in terms of new technologies, and what's on the horizon for fresh blueberries, including the use of sulfur dioxide and modified atmosphere packaging. I've also asked him to touch on tools and resources needed to improve shelf life of exported blueberries, as U.S. shippers are trying more and more to ship via ocean freight to save costs and compete globally. We've also invited Dion Hugo and Alvin van Jaarsveld from Tessera and Chris Campson from the Veritiv Corporation to discuss new technologies becoming available for use on fresh blueberries. Dion, Alvin, and Chris will provide a technical overview of sulfur dioxide pad application on fresh blueberries, the effect on product life extension, and share feedback from trial work done during the 2020 season in California, Washington, and British Columbia. They will also provide an update on the EPA's pending tolerance for sulfur dioxide in the U.S. and the emergency approval process for use of sulfur dioxide pads for exports from California and Washington. Before we introduce our first speaker, I want to point out that the chat feature for this webinar is live, and I want to encourage you to submit comments and questions that you have throughout the presentations. We will take questions at the end for all panelists, and we'll answer them in the order that they are received. I'd now like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Randy Beaudry from Michigan State University, a familiar face to the blueberry industry. Welcome. Dr. Beaudry is a post-harvest physiologist working at Michigan State University. He does 50% research and 50% extension work in the Department of Horticulture. Dr. Beaudry's activities focus on both practical and fundamental aspects of preserving the post-harvest quality of fruits and vegetables. Specific areas of expertise include modified atmosphere packaging, controlled atmosphere storage, the use of evaporative cooling in developing countries, the use of bioactive volatile compounds, including the ethylene action inhibitor 1-methylcyclopropene, or 1-MCP, non-destructive quality assessment, post-harvest disorder biology and control, and the biochemistry of aroma volatiles. Much of Dr. Beaudry's research is service-oriented, and he works closely with the apple industry in Michigan, the international blueberry shipping industry, and a storage innovation program in India. Current emphasis for the Great Lakes apple fruit industry is placed on the development of storage protocols for the CO2-sensitive variety Honeycrisp, development of blueberry disinfestation and quarantine protocols, evaluating the use of new 1-MCP formulations, and determining the lower oxygen limit for California storage of apple fruit. Internationally, Dr. Beaudry has worked in several countries in support of shared research and education interests. In 2015 to 16, he was awarded a Fulbright Research Scholar Award for a 6-week project in Talca, Chile, and was a Distinguished Fulbright Fellow in India in 2019. He has ongoing linkages with the Federal University in Paraíba, Brazil, hosting 2 Brazilian PhD research scholars. Currently, Dr. Beaudry is engaged in a 2-year USAID project with IARI in India, constructing evaporating cool structures and photovoltaic-powered refrigeration systems for smallholder farms. Thank you, Dr. Beaudry, and welcome.
Modified atmosphere packaging, MAP. Sulfur dioxide, some of the work we've done there for disinfestation as well as disease control. Phosphine gas, and then finally on X-rays. So temperature, it's known to be valuable for centuries. The United States, believe it or not, used to be the world's exporter of ice. So the Ice King was from New York State. And so we used to ship it around, but for the purpose of not only chilling drinks, but also preserving foods. And there's a reason for that. And the reason it works is because as you reduce temperature, and in this particular graph, you can see this temperature on the x-axis, as you reduce temperature for decay organisms, their decay rates decline. And for blueberries or other products, their rate of respiration or rate of metabolism declines. So just a very simple background there. Low temperature works very well, not only for the target fruit or vegetable, but also for the decay organisms that would be a problem. So we start out with temperature, old technology, still valuable. It's our first step in terms of controlling loss of quality. So to move on quickly to modified atmosphere storages, so both CA and MAP, I want to talk just for a moment about the idea that we can reduce both oxygen or increase carbon dioxide, and then talk a little bit about what we want to gain from that. I like this graphic and then the one that follows this on carbon dioxide because it really sort of gives you a sense of the physiology that we're targeting with that low oxygen or high CO2, and then which products benefit. So low oxygen, the primary reason we use it internationally is to reduce ethylene perception, and that slows down the ripening of things like apples, pears, bananas, kiwi fruit, and slows the senescence of some coal crops like cabbage. So that's an ethylene-driven process as well. It can reduce oxidative browning on cut surfaces. So you see those packages of cut lettuce and so on. So those are probably the two primary reasons we use low oxygen. And you don't see blueberries over here under the commodities. Low oxygen, as far as has been shown, is really not that helpful to blueberry storage. So let's move on to carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide has a number of different positive effects. It reduces ethylene perception, once again, just like low oxygen does. Reduces chlorophyll degradation, so it can keep green things green. Blueberries aren't green, so not an issue here. But it can also suppress decay. And if you get to the level between 5 and 20%, somewhere in that range, you begin to suppress decay of almost of many of our fungal pathogens, by many of our fungal pathogens. The problem is you have to have a crop that's also resistant to those high carbon dioxide levels. That's hundreds of times higher than exists in the environment. And so you have to have relatively specialized physiology in order to withstand those high CO2 levels. And so blueberry is one of those, blackberry, cherry, and so on. So this is the reason we use high CO2 or CA storage or MAP storage for blueberries and use it successfully for suppressing fungal decay. But here's an image that I took from many years ago, kind of modified a little bit to make things show up a little bit. 0% carbon dioxide, 15, 30, 50, 80, and 100% CO2. And then the bright glowing areas are Calotochromum in this particular case, growing on those blueberry fruit that have been highlighted. You can see the higher the CO2, the greater the suppression of this fungal disease. It's just an image to kind of show that. The other thing that it also shows is that even at 30% CO2, which is quite toxic to blueberries, you still have fungal decay. So you don't stop it, but rather you slow it down. And generally what I've seen over the many, many years, CO2 reduces decay by about 30%. So the CO2 levels that we use, it slows it down about 30%. So you can apply that in a room, which is under complete control, or you can use a modified atmosphere packaging to do the same sort of thing. And in this particular case, I showed the package here with some blueberries in it. The oxygen moves through the film and services the respiratory needs of the fruit. And then the fruit, as they respire, give off carbon dioxide, which builds up in the package. And that's our target. We want to have that carbon dioxide in the package. And there are different technologies that are used. You can have release of CO2 or even absorption of CO2. And you also have some escape of carbon dioxide from the environment. So all of this can be easily managed with the right approaches and is modeled mathematically to give you kind of predictable atmospheres. I won't go into that detail, but this one graphic I think is kind of important for folks to understand that a package is not a package. They're not all the same. A perforated package, for instance, behaves very differently than a non-perforated package. So a non-perforated package, CO2 has to move through the film and it's responsive to the selectivity of that film. Whereas if it's going through a perforation or very small perforations in the film, then it's based, the CO2 that accumulates is based on the diffusion of CO2 in air. So a different process rather than going for the two. I'll talk about this a little bit, but I would also want to mention here that for blueberries, remember high CO2 is valuable. So if you had a package, for instance, that gave you 5% oxygen, if it was a non-perforated package, you'd have about 4% CO2 in it. If you have a perforated package, you have about 15% CO2 in it. So that's why it's important to use perforated packages for the high CO2 that they generate for a given level of oxygen for things like blueberry, strawberry, raspberry, and so on. And that is in part what happens in the commercial world. So here's a Tektral bag being filled with a carbon dioxide. That Tektral bag allows the CO2 to accumulate and be retained after it's injected from the outside. So this is one very common commercial technique used with a large modified atmosphere package. But once again, CA storage can be used and is used. We have some CA storages here in Michigan for temporary short-term storage, maybe as much as 30 days while the fruit are waiting marketing. So effective at suppressing decay, but there is some issue with softening. We did an experiment some years back where we modified CO2 and oxygen, in this case, trying to mimic what happens in a perforated package. So you would have high oxygen, low CO2, high oxygen, low CO2, low oxygen, and a high carbon dioxide level building up. And so we looked at the effect of these different combinations for modified atmosphere packaging or a passive CO2 CA system on the quality of the fruit. And what we noticed is that in terms of decay, if you're looking at decay in air, generally speaking, the decay in air, which is this hash mark bar here, the decay was typically higher and was reduced about 30% as the carbon dioxide levels go up. So if you look at this graphic, 0% CO2, 6, 12, 13, 15, 16 and a half, 18, 19, and so on. So the higher the CO2, typically the lower the decay level. So yep, it works as it would be suspected to do. Something as low as even 6 to 12% was sufficient to suppress decay to about the maximum extent normally expected. What we did also see, though, is that on a cultivar specific basis, we found a difference or a shift in the firmness of those fruit. So those fruit tended to be firmer, not always, but tended to be firmer if they were held in air. And then they could be softened by the high carbon dioxide levels. And it wasn't true for every cultivar. Some behaved one way, others behaved the opposite. So this is the kind of important knowledge, I think, when we're taking a fruit and putting it on board a ship or CA container and sending it overseas. Some will respond favorably, some will not. And this sort of work needs to be evaluated for every cultivar that's being used or shipped. One of the other things that we looked at also was internal discoloration, which is basically the death of the tissues on the inside of the fruit. And those mimic the softening. So we found that the discoloration increased as the CO2 levels increased. So once again, the air had the least amount of discoloration for most of these, and then it increased. And then there were some blueberry varieties where we did not see a difference from the high CO2 to the low CO2 environment. So once again, showing that there's cultivar sensitivity here, and we have to think about that when we're developing this. The last little bit here in the conversation that we'll talk about is some disinfestation and decay control. The work that I'll share with you goes over a couple of different studies. There's sulfur dioxide with and without modified atmosphere packaging. So, and then we also have sulfur dioxide in a contained environment. So kind of a CA equivalent. I'll talk a little bit about phosphine gas. Phosphine gas, for those of you who are science buffs, is also found around the planet Venus this last year. There's a sign potentially of life on that planet, which would be pretty darn interesting. Of course, we're not talking about Venus today. And then finally on X-rays and its ability to disinfest blueberry fruit. So let's get started. So the first project that I'll just discuss in brief was a project we carried out in Chile back in 2013. We took these blueberry fruits, some of them were treated with sulfur dioxide in modified atmosphere packaging and non-modified atmosphere packaging, and then also in perforated, non-perforated packages, and sent them from Chile to the United States. So we received them here a couple of weeks after they were sent. So this is the timeline here and the temperature. So the temperature was maintained at a nice low level, and then you can see the spikes as we resorted and then retreated the fruit. So for a very brief time, they're exposed to higher temperatures. Just kind of a nice show of what happens in the chain as well. As I mentioned earlier, the carbon dioxide and oxygen levels will be affected by whether you've got a perforated or a non-perforated package. And you'll see that those packages that are perforated tend to hug this line here, which is what I would expect. Those that are non-perforated tend to be out here and at lower oxygen levels. And one of the things that it shows you is that the gases that are moving don't all move through the perforation, or they don't all move through the film. But it also tells me something really important here. And that is these packages are all behaving like they were perforated, but also with movement through the gas film. So those packages that were supposed to be manufactured and supposed to be sealed, shipped to the United States, so the non-perforated packages, they all leaked, okay? A big problem with modified atmosphere packaging when you're depending on the package to be sealed. The perforated packages sort of behave as they would be expected. We also use sulfur dioxide treatment. This was a gaseous treatment for 1 day prior to shipment. And you can see in terms of decay that the sulfur dioxide suppressed decay pretty dramatically. So it's a very effective treatment. More recently, in the last couple of years, we've been looking at sulfur dioxide as a disinfestation mechanism. And so we did this at low pressure, basically 1/100th of an atmosphere pressure, very low pressures to try to enhance vacuum infiltration. And we also did it at atmospheric pressure. So we looked at, in this case, at sulfur dioxide for a period of 16 hours. So a 16-hour exposure period. And in terms of, and the insect that we were looking at was blueberry maggot. So the blueberry maggot was unaffected by by sulfur dioxide concentrations for that 16-hour period, up to about 2,200. And we never really got a reduction until we got to about 22,000 parts per million of the sulfur dioxide. So we had to go to very high concentrations. So you ask yourself, well, what does that do to the blueberry fruit? Well, it does a lot to the blueberry fruit. Sulfur dioxide is a bleaching agent. And so as it increases in concentration, what you see is a shift in the color value. So we have a scale down here. We've looked at anything that was over a 2 as being unsaleable. So they broached or breached the number 2 number here right at around 1,000 or 1,100 parts per million. So anything higher than that would cause damage. So that very highest concentration that we used, the 22,000 parts per million, to inhibit the blueberry maggot emergence was not a viable treatment because it damaged the fruit so much. So this was a short-term exposure to very high concentrations. We are following that up now with work on phosphine gas. We're using a simple system like this in a hood to allow the gas, the fumes, which are, phosphine is a toxin, to allow those toxic fumes to escape. We're using a mass spectrometer to monitor phosphine as well as sulfur dioxide in the work that we're doing currently. So we expose the fruit to different concentrations for different durations, and I'll share a little bit of that kind of premature data with you right now. So the dosages that you're looking at here are 200 to about 1,500 parts per million. And you'll see that at 200 parts per million, we saw a significant reduction. And by the time we got to 1,000 or 1,500 parts per million for the phosphine gas, it completely eliminated the blueberry maggot. So it's a pretty effective treatment. This, unfortunately, is a 2-day exposure period at relatively high temperatures because we had to use that space in the laboratory there, which was not temperature controlled. So we've done a little bit of work since then. Once we realized that we could contain the phosphine gas in the container and it would not dissipate over time, we looked at temperature effects. And so once again, looking at the 200 parts per million treatment, which we knew was not a complete control, but allowed us to see shifts with temperature, we find that as the temperature declines, so 22, 7.5, 2, and 5.5 degrees Celsius, we see that the effectiveness of that phosphine gas is diminished for a 2-day exposure. So still effective, but not completely effective, and certainly not enough for a quarantine process. We're also looking at X-rays, and this is the last little bit I'll talk to you about. And this is very preliminary, not the work that I'm specifically doing in my laboratory, but I'm associated with here at Michigan State University. We exposed blueberry fruit to 100 to 300 grays of X-ray radiation and really got very, very good control of the blueberry maggot in those fruit. So here's the doses. There's a control, some that were just manipulated as if they had gone through a machine applying the X-rays. And then as the X-ray intensity increased up to about 300 grays, we were able to just nearly completely control the blueberry maggot. And those pupa that did form did not look like they were viable. So that work needs to be repeated. We had just gotten started at the end of the blueberry season this year. So we'll get back at it this next year. So technology assessment, temperature, always beneficial. High CO2, CA, or MAP, it's beneficial in slowing, but it never stops decay, but can cause damage. So it's cultivar dependent and something that always needs to be thought about. Sulfur dioxide, effective for decay control at low concentration, but really is not effective for insect control, at least not at high concentration where it causes severe damage. We need to do more work at longer term exposures with lower concentrations, and some very early work suggests that that might be a very viable means of controlling some insect pests. Phosphine gas, effective for insect control, but slow to act, effectiveness is reduced at low temperatures. No apparent damage to the fruit, however. We never saw any problems with the fruit, even at the highest concentration that we used. X-rays, they were very effective at insect control. It was extremely fast, which is nice in terms of handling, but it's inconvenient to apply. X-rays need to be applied in kind of a plenum. So the X-ray concentration diminishes by the square, I believe, of the distance from the emitter. So they have to be in a very narrow band relative to the position of the emitter. No evidence of damage, but we're still here early in the evaluation of those fruit. Haven't done thorough storage trials. So that's it. Thank you for having me for the introduction. And Alicia, I'll hand it back over to you.
Dr. Budgie, that was great. Again, reminder, we have our chat feature open. We can take questions at the end, but for now, we'll move on to our representatives from TESARA. I'll give their introduction right now. Dion Hugo is based in Calgary and serves as TESARA's first business development manager for the US and Canada. He joined Tessara as head of finance upon his return to South Africa in 2013. Prior to joining Tessara, he served most of his accounting career in London with Bibendum Wine and subsidiaries, suppliers of wine to major UK retailers. He also holds a forestry science degree from the University of Stellenbosch. Alvin van Jaarsveld is the head of marketing and sales at Tessara and based in South Africa. He holds a master's degree in agricultural science and has a wide-ranging experience in fruit exports, post-harvest handling, and treatment of fresh crops, as well as integrated pest management. He has developed 2 international post-harvest packaging patents and will discuss the effect of sulfur dioxide pads on product life extension. And third, Chris Campson is an enterprise account executive and custom packaging representative for Veritiv Corporation based in Clovis, California. Chris was involved in the emergency approval of sulfur dioxide pads in California and Washington in 2020 and will share feedback from trial work done during the last season in California, Washington, and British Columbia. So Dion, I'll hand it off to you. Welcome.
Good morning all. Alicia, thank you very much. A warm welcome, a Tessara welcome to everybody on the webinar this morning. Just a little bit on Tessara, just a small thing. Tessara is a global market leader in sulfur dioxide generators, or pads as they are known in the US. And it's really used for the preserving of fresh produce. Tessara is constantly, it's got its own R&D department in South Africa, a proudly South African company, constantly coming up with new products in the SO2 environment. And our current focus is and next in line is really the Berrysys, with a very successful first season in South Africa. And the 2 products that we're really pushing out at this point in time is Berrysys, which is linked to the emergency registration that Alicia referred to. And then at a later stage, approximately 2 years from now, 2 seasons, we can also look at the Berrysys Light product. Just before I introduce or hand over to the other 2 esteemed gentlemen, I just really want to use the opportunity to thank the US blueberry industry, the individuals involved all the way through to the IRF4, for their time and the effort invested up until this point. I'm very happy to announce that the residue data has been submitted to the IRF4, to the EPA, through the IRF4 mid-December. The current timelines on that is not great, but we're pretty much in the hands of the EPA to review that data and then set the residue levels, and we can continue with the full registration of the products in the various states. And we are really truly looking forward to spend our focus and energy on the growers and the value we can add there instead of the registrations. Okay, so for the first leg of presentation, Alvin's going to take us really through and cover a bit the blueberry opportunities with Berrysys, what the product is, and really the application, the ease of application. I will then take you through some of the trials and the successes we've had, and try and demonstrate the real value of the product, and yeah. Chris will then join Alvin and I in the Q&A session, and I think that's really what we decided where we try and add value is I've had a couple of calls this week, and the real thing is it's how the product is used, and what it is not 100% clear. And just before I hand over to Alvin, I just really also just want to focus on Chris and his team. Before my arrival in July, August this year in the Americas, him and his team has really been the ones that's been pushing this product for the last 2-3 years, and trying to get it into the market, and has spent a lot of time and effort in it, and also managed to get us a couple of local trials. And with that, I'm going to hand you over to Alvin. He's going to take us through the first session. Alvin.
Hi, hello everyone. let's get into it. So the blueberry opportunity. We have been dealing with sulfur dioxide technology for more than 25 years. We're quite well known in the table grape industry, and I think that's where sulfur dioxide technology is most often used with fruit, fresh fruit. The first SO2 pads, as they're known, were developed in the USA in the 1960s. So it's quite an old, well-entrenched technology, and because blueberries are a superfood, a superfruit, as I'm sure everybody on this call is aware, and also suffer from botrytis. We thought, many years ago, this presents us with quite a nice opportunity because we know that sulfur dioxide is extremely effective against fungal pathogens, most notably botrytis cinerea, which is one of the main pathogens when you store at cold temperature, because it's quite effective, despite temperature at remaining, being able to grow. Many of the other pathogens like Rhizopus, Penicillium are much more inhibited by colder temperature closer to zero than botrytis. And it's quite important for us as a company. We want to stamp out food loss, fruit loss, specifically post-harvest losses of food, because we feel at that stage there's already been a lot of investment. You've grown the fruit, you've spent a lot of resources, and it's a shame and indeed a crime to lose the fruit on the way from the farm to the market, from field to fork, as they say. So it's important for us to play to our strengths and inhibit post-harvest decay. SO2, as our previous speaker quite adequately indicated, is extremely effective as a surface disinfectant, and that's exactly what we need to do to inhibit decay. And this is our common enemy, botrytis cinerea. As I mentioned, it's effective. It is certainly slowed down at low temperature. Its optimum growing temperature is definitely not 0 degrees Celsius or even -0.5, where fruits like table grapes and blueberries are frequently kept. But it will still continue growing. And it's important to be reminded that all pathogens tend to be opportunistic, and definitely, they grow on sugar. They need that as a resource. They generally are wound pathogens. So, blueberries are picked off a bush. So every berry has a picking scar, and this picking scar, presents quite a nice entry point for pathogens. And there's other, on the styler end of the fruit, there's also the leftover bits of the flower that sometimes have organic material, dried organic material, even some protein from the styler end. So there's a lot of opportunity for fungal pathogens to attack the fruit, and that's why it's nice to have SO2 to sterilize. As the old adage says, one bad apple spoils the bunch or spoils the barrel. It is exactly like that with botrytis. It has a nesting habit. So that means if you have one fruit that is destroyed by the fungal pathogen, it tends to turn into mush, and it grows out from there. It has this so-called nesting habit, and frequently you see these bearded creatures that grow in your boxes of fruit if things go wrong. And unfortunately, research and publications tell us that 10 to 40% of blueberry fruit can, under the right kind of wrong conditions, typically lots of rain, older varieties, more softer varieties, adverse weather conditions, and the like, can be lost post-harvest. And again, this is terrible because these are fruits that money has been spent on them. They had to be grown and harvested. And what we've also seen, typically over a 21-day period, again, depending on the cultivar, depending on the conditions, lots of different factors, the post-harvest disease incidence could be anything from 2 to 65%, worst case scenario, obviously. And these photos, I think, adequately illustrate that. And what we found to be very interesting and what we've aimed for is two main things. Firstly, storage potential. Not only because it's important to be able to stretch seasons, but when you think that you have a country like the USA that produces, and Canada, in fact, that produces a vast amount of blueberries, it's a pity that if you had more adequate ways to improve the length of storage, you could stretch the value of that product, because you wouldn't be competing against a vast volume of fruit in the market. You would be close to the market in any case. Typically, local markets are quite loyal. So in the USA, they would support US fruit above imported fruit, providing that US fruit, for instance, would be available. The same in Canada, the same in many countries. So there's definitely value in storing good, strong varieties, using post-harvest technologies, or even a combination of post-harvest technologies like CA and SO2, or MAP and SO2, to name two that frequently dovetail quite nicely together. So we certainly wanted to achieve that. And then, of course, shipping. I think it's been no surprise to many of you that 2020 was clearly a horrible year, and COVID-19 caught everybody by surprise. And by the way, it's quite nice to have a conversation without wearing a mask for once. But in shipping, we are seeing severe disruptions in ports. There's a shortage of containers. Frequently, ports are inundated with personnel that are in quarantine, so they don't operate at full potential, and we see disruption. So if you're exporting fruit, it's quite nice to have technologies that can give you peace of mind to be able to get your fruit to market in the condition that you pack them. Also, if you have technologies that give you a little bit of stretch in terms of being able to store, in being able to ship, in being able to sea freight, because that's a lot more cost effective, than air freight specifically at the moment. I mean, air freight rates are horrendous due to the shortage of air traffic. This will allow you to reach further and better into more export destinations. Typically from the US, it's nice to reach some of those Asian destinations, because they have a culture of eating a lot of fruit, but you've got to land the fruit in good condition. Otherwise, you don't get the returns that you need to. And then it was important for us to have a product that interfaces quite well with what growers and grower shippers are doing at the moment. We didn't want a technology that was so difficult or expensive or complicated to apply that it would cause disruption to the industry. We wanted something that was very easy, very straightforward, that would provide benefit and literally give you bang for buck. So what is Berisys? Berisys is a plastic laminated sheet. When you look at it, it just looks like a sheet of material. It looks like one thing. It's a dual release product. As Dion alluded to, we've got two Berisys and Berisys Light, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But it's got two stages, a fast release stage and a slow release stage. That's why we call it a dual release. And these are two different surface areas that will release SO2 gas. And it's got a chemical in there called sodium metabisulfite that reacts with atmospheric humidity, H2O in gaseous form, and it releases low levels of SO2 gas, and that's why it's termed an SO2 generator. It's a little device that keeps on pumping out low levels of SO2. And again, I'm so glad our previous speaker, told you about the SO2 damage. So that's why it took us a while to develop this product, because you need to have a level that is high enough to control botrytis, but low enough to not damage the fruit, and also not to be illegal in terms of the residue levels that typically apply to fruit. And just in case anybody's wondering, that MRL level tends to be around 10 ppm. And that's for a sulfide residue. That's the chemical that forms when the SO2 gas binds to the epidermis or the skin of the blueberry in this instance. And it's quite ephemeral. It doesn't last that long, but still we want to be safe. We don't want to have a product that will upset customers and make people afraid, because fresh produce is supposed to be exactly that. It's supposed to be fresh. And the fast release stage, goes to a little over 100 ppm. So it's quite far below the 1100 ppm that starts to get to that level 2 that we saw in the previous photos. And the reason why it needs to be above 100 ppm per hour is because that is the level that typically kills actively growing botrytis. So that's what we know that we need to achieve, to kill the fungus, to sterilize the fruit surface. And as I said, it needs to be extremely easy to apply. Literally, it can't be easier than just putting it on the top of the box. And that's what is illustrated here. And we've got material like this in electronic form or hard copy form. And that's why Chris is on the call, so that you can get more from him. But if you pack more than one layer of punnets, you would put a sheet or a generator or a pad on top of each layer. Or if it's just one layer in the box, you just put it on top of the box. And that's where I end. And I will hand over to Dion.
Thank you very much, Alwyn. Yes, we're going to touch quickly on, and very quickly, on some of the trials and the successes that we've had. Next slide, please, Alwyn. So this is typical a punnet trial, i.e. a clamshell that's been stored at roughly about 32.9 degrees Fahrenheit. For those that doesn't get the degrees Celsius, for 42 days, or the equivalent of 6 weeks really. And then what our research guy in South Africa, Alton, has also done is and he always done this with the trials, is to add on a bit of a shelf life, a 7-day at 10 degrees Celsius or roughly 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And what we've seen here is and it's quite a, you can see it, is that they found that there's roughly an increase of about 20% of the marketable fruit. And then just something quickly to mention on the slide is that there were no inoculation on this trial. Next slide, please, Ollie. Right, so let's just get back to your guys' reality and the growers' reality, and really the defect tolerances on the blueberries generally, depending on where the fruit goes and who the buyers are, is you've got a 2 to 8% allowance on defects on the blueberries, and more than that might even relate into rejections of our containers. The top 3 leading issues or challenges that you guys have is obviously the softening of the fruit, depending on the season and the climate, the damage at harvesting, and then our friend botrytis, the grow mold, that is really all around us. And there's some images you are all fully aware of the impact and what it looks like. Then just a quick reality check and the financial impact. We thought it's just relevant to just put something in there. So the value of a typical container, once again, depending on where in the season and where it's shipped to, can range anything from 60 to 100,000 US dollars. And then just a simple calculation of 20% on that, and the amount of money that you can potentially put back in your pocket, the saving, is between 12 and 20,000 US dollars. So here's some trials and successes. So here's really the focus on the Berries Lite, and come back to the registration issue that we have. The challenges is the Berries Lite product will not be used in the US till we have the full registration section 3 in place. But we thought we'll show this to you. I mean, your chances of infection and the nesting effect that Alvin is referring to, it's quite apparent there on the red circles. But this trial is similar to time span to the other one, 6 weeks, also with a shelf life extension. And even in this format, so it's basically a box, a liner that is filled with bulk berries. Berries Lite goes on top and is literally shipped like that into the UK and the next slide. So, I mean, just once again, that the remarkable difference of a good 20% in difference. So here's coming back to my previous point, here is actually a shipment that we've done with one of our customers in South Africa in the last season. And note there's a MAP bag in this trial, and it's really the way the customer packs its goods. It's their preference. It's not a requirement from our side. Four varietals were shipped and trialed in the shipment with MAP bags, and then obviously the Beresis Light on top, and the others were micro-perforated liners alongside that. But just from the photo, it's quite apparent that the losses there is significantly lower on arrival in the UK. And then just sort of a quick summary, and finishing it all up, is the effectiveness of Beresis. Very simple. Beresis can be used with or without controlled atmosphere, the CA, and similar on the MAP and the bags. What is important, it really, and we can't stipulate this enough, is this, so it really improves storage potential, and we'll have that for you guys in the future. And then increases hugely shipping, i.e. sea freight potential. And then something that I did not put on the slide, but is really quite apparent in the US, especially with COVID around and food shortages, is there's the potential of a real reduction in food waste. And I think, it's one of my passions, and I know a lot of the staff at Tesrose, is that, our real drive for the company and the way forward is that we're really trying to make a difference in the growers' lives. And ultimately, in the global population, is if we can push products into the market that can reduce the food waste, it's a win for everybody around. Next slide, please, Owen. And then just a quick summary, and here's the contact details. So first in line, really, in the US at this point in time, is Chris Kempson. He can brief you on availability of stock, how to use it. He's got a great team behind him, all the way up into BC. I will also try and assist a little bit on the BC side. It's just across the mountain from me. I'm second in line, and Alvin, and please, we are very happy to take any questions offline. Please send us an email. I can respond with my telephone number. I am really available at any point in time for any questions. I'll quickly touch, before we go into the Q&A session, I just quickly want to touch on the registrations that Alicia referred to, and a lot of it was the temporary registration was done for 2020 in California and Washington. Very on the back of the season, we've gained a little bit of ground in California. The problem with the 24Cs is that they are really just for short term, really issued for a specific period, i.e. a season. We've managed to get at least very good progress on renewing that for the current season. And once again, just for clarity, the 24C is for export purposes only. You are not allowed to use that for storage. Under that, Beresis for storage in the US. Just there might be one or two questions on the Section 18, the emergency exemption. I've had one or two of those. It's not viable in this case. We've looked at it, and the requirements just doesn't fit Beresis. Section 3, I've touched a little bit on, but we can answer more questions on that. But the short story is 18 months review process at the EPA. Once the tolerances on blueberries are set, it's really quickly from our side and the Tesrose side, it's a 6 months registration process in the various states where we think we want to launch this product, where there's a requirement for it, and we'll take it from there. So Alicia, thank you very much. We will take some questions and hopefully can provide some of the answers.
Okay, thanks Dion and Alvin. Well, at this point, we'll transition to the Q&A portion. And again, just to remind everyone, the chat feature is where we'll be taking questions. We did get one already, and I have some follow-up questions myself too, so depending on what comes in from our audience. The first question we got was, does the Barrysys SO2 diffusion rate increase with higher RH-free water? If yes, how do you prevent an excessive SO2 concentration when the cold chain is not very well maintained and the water vapor starts to condense during the shipping and handling, which is a big problem when shipping to China? So I'm not sure who wants to take this, maybe Alvin or Dion.
No, I think Alvin will take it.
Okay.
I'll take it. It's a good question. Typically, the SO2 generators activate above 70% RH. So as soon as you close any container with fresh fruit, the RH will immediately shoot up to that level or higher. So that means the product is activated. That's why it's got a laminated technology in this case, so that you cannot over apply the product. I think maybe 7 years ago, some of these products were more primitive, and they didn't have the limitation technologies to prevent over application and the kind of issues that the question potentially raises. So in this instance, you cannot exceed that because it's because you've got a plastic sheet that limits the amount of SO2 that can be provided, that is generated at any given stage. And it's also logical to think about it because, if you think of this thing as a little generator, it's got to have a fuel tank, and the fuel tank is the chemical. So if you have over application, you have the added disadvantage that you run out of fuel, you run out of gas. So that's why the product is manufactured and designed in such a way that it limits the application and also gives you length of application. So it's an extremely valid question because moisture formation, condensation is probably one of the biggest issues affecting post-harvest fruits. Never mind blueberries, everything.
This is Chris Alwyn. I don't know if you guys can hear me now, but I'll just jump in. And this is a technology also that I would assure those listening has been validated in the table grape industry, and the construction of this pad is building upon what's been established and what we've proven throughout the country and throughout the world for 20 plus years in table grapes. So now we're extending that technology with a refined formulation specific to blueberries that has been well proven, and our product is specifically proven for that exact question as to how to prevent bleaching and condensation fluctuations. So it is a technology well proven for that condition.
Thank you. The next question from Mario Flores. So how many months are we really looking at until we can use an SO2 product pad for ocean exports from the west coast of the U.S. to ship to Asia? And Dave Trinka's follow-up questions related. 24C applications have been submitted in California and Washington and is in the process for Oregon, but not yet submitted to the state. So really kind of break down where we're at. Again, I know you touched on it, Dion, but what the timeline is and what to expect for 2021.
Right, very simple. Typically an application with, 24C needs to be driven by the growers in the various states. It's then typically done through the local berry organization or the commission to the local Department of Agriculture. A typical process like that can take up to 3 months. I mean, we can try and assist. I mean, Todd's done some great work in California trying to get that process through. So there is a bit of a template, and if he doesn't mind, we can push that through. But I am more than happy to assist with the 24Cs in the various states. We are focusing on California. California will be in place. We had very good feedback yesterday. on some of the Asian countries, and I can publish a list. Whoever's interested in what's allowed, but I think we just give us another week or two just to see how many of those authorities, the extension authorities coming in from the various countries. But very simple, California should be fine for exports in the 2021 season. Washington, we will work on very hard, and then 3 months for Michigan and obviously Oregon, and I will assist where I can. So very positive for the 2021 season, and at this point in time, we have not had requests for any other states, but that's also something we can have a look at and assist where we can.
Alicia, I'll also add to that. We have stock in California
Yes.
already, so we've planned, and we are already have affirmation for a list of Asian countries already. So and we are waiting for more to join the list. So I think that's what Dion refers to when he says, just give us a week or two to publish, because that list will grow in the next week or two. But it's already a viable product for a whole host of Asian export countries, from the US, and we have the stock on site already. So because we knew that shipping it last minute, considering all these COVID delays, would be problematic.
This is
And just for example, this is the UK is already on that list.
Countries that do not require a registration for SO2. So, for example, in the EU, there's many countries where SO2 is considered a preservative, and it is not regulated in the same way that it is here in the United States. So for many countries, we have the ability to use it in export contingent upon our domestic states and counties approving the use of it domestically. So it is available for use in many Asian markets as well as European markets. We're closely tracking and building upon that list, but we would love to work closely with each of you in different states as you have interest and availability, as well as Alicia with you, to further expand that availability.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. And just kind of going back to last year, we really got through the North American Blueberry Council, supported the state's efforts to seek these Section 24Cs due to the limited air freight that was available back in March when the pandemic was hitting. So and really shutting things down right as the U.S. harvest was picking up. So it was a fast approval. It happened for California, Washington. Hoping to renew that in the 2021 season and expand to Oregon as well. So, and when they reference the countries too, just to clarify, in the process, the foreign country has to submit or indicate their approval and confirm their tolerance for SO2. So that's what the states are individually working on, the state commissions, and the North American Blueberry Council is also supporting that effort as well. So, that's the process to get this done ultimately until there's an EPA tolerance for SO2, which will, definitely clear the path for additional SO2 products. So one question that we got earlier and I answered it briefly for Dr. Beaudry, when you referenced blueberry maggot and SWD, Jeff asked if it was the same. It's definitely two different pests. We work on different protocols, especially in the export world, to show demonstration of control for both. But can you kind of touch on the differences? I know we've been working on a task project, the Technical Assistance for Specialty Crop, through the U.S. High Bush Blueberry Council, and just kind of touch briefly on the differences there. But then also, and I know you referenced it as well, but how the treatments are similar and different for each of the pests.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry if I wasn't clear. I was kind of pushing to get through a lot of material in a short bit of time. Spotted wing Drosophila is test that has multiple generations per year and has different sensitivities than the blueberry maggot does to some of these post-harvest treatments. So for instance, the blueberry maggot doesn't seem to mind the low temperature environment, but the spotted wing Drosophila, for instance, is killed by up to by more than 21 days, I think, at 0 degrees Celsius is what we were finding here. Pretty much knocks it out. And so we're finding that also that the spotted wing Drosophila, for whatever reason, is much more sensitive to sulfur dioxide, and it could be the way that they breathe the atmosphere. So, but the phosphine gas, for instance, seems to be more effective with blueberry maggot, which is it's a different organism altogether. One is a Rhagaleta species, and the other one is a Drosophila species. Both present different problems for different markets, I think, right now.
Great, thanks. Yeah, that's good to know. I know, these products and definitely come up in both pest management and shelf life extension, so there's definitely a connection there. So thank you. All right, well, we are at the end of our hour. Our time is up. I want to extend a huge thanks to our speakers for participating and to our audience for tuning in today. I hope this was informative and insightful. In case you missed any portion or wish to share it with colleagues, a recorded version of this webinar will be available on this platform after we're done here. I also want to share that the USHBC and NABC Spring Virtual Conference and Expo is coming up from March 16th through 19th. So stay tuned for registration details coming soon for more interesting topics ranging from science to marketing and industry development. In the meantime, stay safe out there and best wishes for a prosperous new year ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Never like a theme in a song, clever. Feeling high, feeling low at the same time. Feels so right, then I'm wrong, hoping I'll be fine. But I get up, I always do. I never think, I always do. Never thought I wouldn't jump, oh what a fool. But if I fall, I will get up again. I will get up again. Stronger than I ever been. I will get up again. Stronger than I ever been. I will get up again. Stronger than I ever been. I can see everything clearer. Trying to fly 'cause I'm light as a feather. But I get high, I get low at the same time. Feels so right, then I'm wrong, hoping I'll be fine. But I get up, I always do. I never think, I always do. Never thought I wouldn't jump, oh what a fool. But if I fall, I will get up again. I will get up again. Stronger than I ever been. I will get up again. Stronger than I ever been. I will get up again. Stronger than I ever been.
Hey, I don't get what this is about. You got my head spinning on my shoulders. I feel a burn inside of my chest. See the lines as they blur out. I can feel it knocking me out. You're bringing me higher and higher in every way. And all of my doubts, I can feel them fading away. Oh, you're like a fantasy. I know this can't those lucid dreams.